The theme of today is about the fight for 15. It's about protecting the rights of workers. A lot of people on the right will say, well, if we paid people $15 an hour or anything more than the minimum wage we have today, that it will cost us jobs and hurt our economy. What's the response from the public citizen shop?
Well, that's upside down. I mean, if we pay people living wages, not only does it help them, but it helps the national economy. And there's overwhelming evidence of that. Part of why we're stagnating is the inequality. It's not just that it's a problem in its own right, which is a massive problem, but it actually makes the economy work less well. Not just in terms of the distribution question, but even just in terms of the production and consumption question. So paying people better is good for the economy. It used to be that mainstream economists understood that, and it was non-controversial. There's really been a concerted effort by the corporate class over the last 40 years to undo basic understandings of sort of simple economic truth. This movement, the living wage movement, many others around the country trying to restore some modest sanity.
My partner Jordan Chariton, his parents own a jewelry store in New York, and someone was trying to convince his parents that it's better if the millionaires and billionaires have more money in their pockets because then they'll buy more jewelry. And Jordan's parents are like, well, millionaires and billionaires are not the ones who come to my shop. I would actually do better if I had more customers who live near me, who are more in the middle class or even the working class, the lower class. That's what would allow me to maybe hire some more people because I'd have more customers.
Yeah, well, you know, there has emerged a non-trivial portion of the economy that basically is providing luxury goods. And no doubt, that little fraction, they depend on the super rich and they benefit from having super rich. But they're basically cut off from the real economy. Most businesses, apparently even most jewelry stores, actually rely on regular people buying. And there just aren't enough of these super rich people. The concentration of wealth and power is extreme. So, you know, if you're in the business of selling yachts, you don't need that big a pool of customers. But if you're in the business of selling almost anything else, you do. And having a top 1% or even a top 0.01%, which is a lot of what we're talking about, that's not a sufficient pool of consumers for you.
So tax cuts for people who are already wealthy don't create jobs, because I thought that was the whole definition, at least Mitt Romney's definition of job creator, which is born wealthy.
That was Mitt Romney's definition, but not a good definition.
Okay, so let's switch over to Democracy Spring. The policies that we make do tend to favor the wealthy, the already wealthy, the born wealthy, capital gains taxes, for example, the way that we fail to regulate Wall Street. What's the relationship between those policies and the campaign finance and voting restrictions issues that are at play in this protest?
Well, they're totally interconnected. There's no way to understand one without the other. It goes both ways. But if you look at what American people want, you know, we're actually not a polarized country. That's a myth that's propagated by the corporate media and the corporate class. Overwhelming numbers of people want people to be paid a living wage. They oppose corporate trade deals. They want health care for all. They want to tackle high drug prices. They want to provide affordable education, even free college. They want jobs for everybody. They want to expand Social Security. Not just defend Social Security, but expand Social Security. They want to defend Medicare. You go down the list, it's overwhelming, but there's a complete disconnect between what the American people want, overwhelmingly, including overwhelming numbers of Republicans, and what comes out of Congress and what comes out of the administration. And the reason is elected officials are responsive not to their constituents, not to voters, but to donors.
If we don't get it, shut it down. 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 If we don't get it, shut it down.
There are policy fixes that Congress could pass, that the president could sign to address the gutting of the Voting Rights Act, to address the Citizens United decision. They haven't chosen to do so. Tell me, first of all, what the policies are and why they haven't chosen to pass those laws.
Yeah, well, both Democracy Spring, Democracy Awakening, we're focusing on 4 key measures, but there are actually a whole bunch more. The short version is fix the Voting Rights Act. Right, restore what the Supreme Court did fix what the Supreme Court did when it overturned key portions for the Shelby County decision, and then go beyond that to make it easier for people to vote, to overcome barriers to registration, extend voting times. That's on the voting rights side. On the money and politics side, overturn Citizens United directly with a constitutional amendment, with a Democracy for All amendment, and then adopt a system of public financing, with small citizen contributions matched by larger public contributions for Congress, and we should also be doing that in the presidential race as well. So these solutions are available. They're well thought out. They're already introduced, could be adopted tomorrow. They have overwhelming public support. Why don't we move forward on it? Well, because of the problem, one of the unique features of the democracy issue is a functioning democracy is self-correcting. So if we had a working democracy and we had problems, people wanted solutions, we'd get the solutions. But we don't have a working democracy. When people want solutions to the democratic crisis, well, the broken democracy gets in the way. So too much power for the fortunate few, too little power for people who are locked out of voting. That's why we don't have these answers.
So I know that you guys are nonpartisan, so you don't want to put the blame on anybody, but what I've observed is that for the most part, with some prominent exceptions, Republicans feel that it's to their advantage if there's a lot of money flooding the political system in terms of elections, and Republicans feel that it's to their disadvantage if the emerging America, the emerging electorate of young people and people of color, if women and poor people have unfettered, unimpeded access to the polls. So what could you do to dissuade them of that perception? Well, first of all, do you think it's true that Republicans essentially need voting restrictions and a flood of money into the political process in order to have a chance of winning elections or to compete, especially on the presidential level? And if it is true, what could you say to dissuade them of taking that approach?
Yeah, I think a two-part answer to the first question, which is to say, yeah, the Citizens United has helped the Republican Party. The outside money that's flowing in, especially the dark secret money, overwhelmingly going to Republicans. So they see benefit in it. And the voting rights restrictions, both before Shelby County decision and after, are overwhelmingly being enacted by Republican state legislatures. Sometimes they're honest and explicit that the purpose is to keep minority voters, African American voters, Latino voters, elderly, away from the polls. So they clearly perceive that. Now, the other half of the question of the discussion, though, is it's not like the Democrats have been defenders on these things, and including especially in the area of big money, where they are themselves massive portions of the party dependent on big money funders. President Obama has done nothing since Citizens United, so he's denounced it, but it's happened on his watch, 2010. He could, with a stroke of a pen, do a really modest thing, issue an executive order that require government contractors to at least disclose their political spending. Hasn't done it. Could have had his IRS work on rules to deal with some of the secret money problems. Hasn't done it. Could have pressured the Federal Election Commission to do something about it. Hasn't done it. Could have pressured the Securities and Exchange Commission to do something about it. Hasn't done it. Could have once used a shit in Congress to try to push forward some of these solutions. Hasn't done it. So it is a bipartisan problem. It's true. Everything you said in your question is right about the Republicans, but we should not be letting Democrats off the hook and view them as our saviors. They aren't our saviors. Now, the good thing about that is the answer to the second part is, what do we do? Well, it's not going to come from persuasion. It's going to come from pressure. So that's why the Democracy Spring, Democracy Awakening protests are so important. How we're going to overcome the barriers is by forcing members of Congress, forcing a next president to take action. They will be responsive ultimately if the electorate demands it. If people are on the street disrupting business as usual, at the end of the day, they do care more about reelecting themselves than anything else and having some kind of calmness in society than anything else. So if we can make it costly for them in that way, we'll get what we need.